Rolling this morning. How's everyone doing? Thumbs up for good. Awesome. Well, good morning and welcome to Petra Coach's Thought Leadership Workshop series. Petra Coach is a mind shift business that empowers leaders and their teams to scale their organizations through the facilitation and implementation of the Rockefeller habits. With a wide network of thought leaders and industry experts, these workshops serve as an opportunity for you to connect personally and ask your most pressing business questions. So today we have Morné Smit with us. Morné is the founder of Emerse, which is a sales consultancy that leads sales development and coaching programs for businesses in over 20 industries across 3 continents. In 2022, with decades of sales experience under his belt, he was named the successor for internationally renowned speaker, author, and close friend of Petra, Jack Daly. Today, Morné is going to share the knowledge and tools to reshape your organization's approach to productivity and growth, optimizing your team's time and resources. This includes how to distinguish between high payoff and low payoff activities, what to do with each, how to run this leverage exercise with your teams, and the accelerator effect of focusing on what matters. As a reminder, this is an interactive session, which means we want to see your faces. So everyone turn your cameras on. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat button. Your materials are about to be dropped in the chat here. And let me pull them up. Hang on just a second. All righty, just sent everyone the materials. So if you could take a second to open the chat and download those will be your guide as Morné leads us. And then at the end, we will take some time for a full Q&A. So I am going to go ahead and pass it off and get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you all from wherever you are dialing into. As Leah said, I would love to see your pretty faces. In fact, Leah, I have an idea. Why don't we have some fun with this? If you have your camera on during this session, at the end of the session, anybody that's got their camera on, I'm going to ask Leah to randomly pick one person whose camera is on, and that person will get a free 1-hour consultation with me personally, and we'll just deep dive whatever it is that you want to do. But in order to qualify for that, I have to see your pretty faces. So I would encourage you to please let me see you during the session today. Thank you so much, Leah and the Petra team, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you guys today. I always have fun with the Petra community. It's such a great community of growth-minded business owners. And that's my tribe. Those are the people that I love to speak with. So today we're going to talk about an interesting topic. But before I dive in, for those of you that have not met me and that don't know anything about me, I'll just give you a brief introduction about who I am. And I guess it's always useful for me to start with the number one thing that I get asked, and that is, I'm sorry, can you just give me your name one more time? So let's talk about that very quickly. This is my name. If you see it written down, my name is Morné. The problem with that name, I guess, is that people look at that and they see this little line that's dangling above the E, and they go, well, I don't really know what that is, so I'm just going to ignore it, and I think I'm just going to call you Morn. I'm good with that. That name is a very South African name. You only get that name if you were born between 1977 and 1981 in South Africa. And quite simply, that's because the captain of the South African rugby team was called Morné du Plessis. And my mom and dad had an argument, and that must have been the one that my dad won. And therefore, I'm called Morné and not Andrew, after my grandfather, as I would have been called if my mom had won that argument that day. My background is that I moved from Cape Town, South Africa, to London in the UK in September of 2001. And a lot of people assume, given what I do for a living, that I must have been one of those kids that was a natural salesperson, that I probably went to Costco when I was young and I bought a big bag of sweets and then parceled it out into smaller bags. And I was just naturally always into sales, and nothing could be further from the truth. I started my career in advertising, and I kind of fell into sales in the UK because, unfortunately, shortly after I arrived there, 9/11 had just happened and my work visa got cancelled by the advertising agency that was American-based. So I find myself in London with no money, no prospects, and the only company that would give me a job was a small IT company, and I had a sales job. And with the benefit of 23 years of hindsight, when I went to the interview, I really should have asked more qualifying questions. But I immediately took the job and only found out the next Monday when I started that I accepted a job as a cold caller. So I started my sales career cold calling small companies, trying to get them to see me so I could sell them Dell computers and Microsoft software. And that really started a 26-year journey where I founded my current company 7 years ago. And today, as Leah mentioned, Immerse serves hundreds of companies in 7 different countries on 3 continents. We're in about 50 different industries now. And really, we have a singular purpose. And that singular purpose is that we believe any company can grow its sales fast, profitably, and predictably. And what I'd like to share with you guys today is one of the 4 key things that I've learned over the last 26 years. Those 4 things are, number 1, selling doesn't work. Now, that might seem a little bit counterintuitive coming from somebody that does what I do for a living. But if we think about it, and if I said, by show of hands, for those of you that have your cameras on, put your hand up if you actually enjoy being sold to. From what I can see on the screen, 0 hands have gone up. And that's kind of like the first thing that I've learned early in my sales career. If I don't enjoy being sold to, then why would my prospects enjoy being sold to? And yet, we spend thousands of hours, hundreds of thousands of dollars training salespeople how to sell. And then the best that we get are salespeople that go to meetings or make calls and they show up and throw up. Let me tell you. Let me tell you why my product is the best, why my service is the best, why we have a market-driven price. Let me tell you about how experienced we are, how knowledgeable we are, about our quality, about our engineering. And that poor prospect just doesn't care. Because people don't buy from us because they have understood what we told them. People buy from us because they feel understood. The second big thing that I've learned in the last 26 years is that there is pattern recognition in sales. There are certain behaviors and activities and habits that if we do them consistently, if we do them with enthusiasm and energy, we are just likely to be more successful. I learned in my 26 years that, ladies and gentlemen, it is not about the product or service. Now, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't be proud of the product or service that you have. I'm not saying that you shouldn't invest in that product or service and try and make it better. But it can't be about the product or service, because when it is, then we have salespeople that lean on that product, that lean on that service, because they expect the product to sell itself. And then we miss a very, very important recognition within sales, and that is, it's about human psychology. It's about buying psychology. It's about having a conversation with the human being. I heard something really interesting. I was flying to Detroit about 2 months ago. And as I was coming into Detroit, I was looking for something to watch. And they have a service on this Delta flight called Masterclass. Some of you might be familiar with it. And I found a guy called Chris Voss. Now, Chris Voss, of course, wrote that famous book on sales, Never Split the Difference. Probably one of the best books on negotiation that you'll ever read. And Chris talked about the fact that as a young FBI negotiator, he realized that there were human lives at stake in these hostage-taken scenarios. And whenever he got into a scenario like that, he knew intuitively that it couldn't be him against the hostage taker. Because if it's me against the hostage taker, then in that relationship, someone has to lose in order for someone to win. And there's human lives at stake. So Chris said, well, I had to develop tactical empathy. We might call it emotional intelligence, but he calls it tactical empathy because it was tactically necessary for him to put aside how he felt about the hostage taker. I had to put aside how abhorrent I think that human being is and how strongly I disagree with what it is that they're doing. I had to find a way to get on the same side as the hostage taker. And we had to look at the problem, the objection that they have. We had to look at the reason that they were taking these human beings as hostages. And I had to get on the same side. And then we had to make the problem the adversary. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't that what consultative selling is? Isn't consultative selling simply having a human conversation, asking great quality questions, and then getting on the same side so that you can agree that there is a problem worth solving? And this is the secret sauce. If there's a problem we're solving, can I help that prospect to solve that problem, even if they don't solve it with me? When I said at the beginning, we should stop selling because it doesn't work, here's the alternative that I'd like your salespeople to try. I want your salespeople to start helping your prospects to buy, even if it's not from you. Because counterintuitively, when you do that, when you demonstrate that you care more about the customer than you do the transaction, you will actually outsell anybody in your product or service category. The fourth thing that I've learned in the last 2 decades, and this is the topic for today's discussion, is that it absolutely matters what we focus on. It absolutely matters what we focus on, because oftentimes we know what to do. In fact, I think some of the content that I'm going to share with you today is not going to be new to you. It's not going to be the first time that you've ever heard this concept. We know what to do, but we very often don't do what we know. And we don't do what we know because we get caught up in all kinds of activities and behaviors and habits. We convince ourselves that there are things that we could and should be doing, but actually that's a limited belief that we have. And today I want to challenge some of those limited beliefs. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start off this morning by being a little bit provocative. I'm going to say that maybe you don't need a better product, a better service, a better price, for the economy to be better, for interest rates to be lower, for inflation to be less. Maybe you don't need somebody different in the White House. Maybe the only thing that you need in order to move the needle in sales in your organization is for you to choose better. For you, your sales leaders, your sales managers, your sales people to choose better. So let's talk about that. When I think about the idea of leveraging time, I start with the simple premise that we all have the same amount. We all have the same amount of time. In fact, it's 168. We have 168 hours in the week. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 168. But of course, we don't have 168 hours to work, because we need to eat, we need to sleep, hopefully exercise a little bit, spend time with friends and family, contribute to our community. Whatever it is that we do outside of work, we normally end up with somewhere between 40 to 60 hours per week to work. 40 hours would be 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. 60 hours might be 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, or some combination thereof. So we have the absolute same number of hours in a week, and we have the relative same number of hours in the week to work. If that's true, then help me with this. Why is it that my fellow countryman, Elon, can run multiple multi-billion-dollar companies? He can send rockets into orbit. He can run Tesla. He can run the Boring Company and whatever it is that he's doing over at X or Twitter at the moment. But we have people in our organizations. You might have salespeople in your organization that say things like, I didn't have time to update the CRM. I didn't have time to prepare for my sales training. I didn't have time to follow up with that quote. I didn't have time to follow up that proposal. I haven't had time yet. How is that possible? Well, of course, the answer is it matters what we choose to focus on. And what I'd like to discuss today is the concept of high payoff activities versus low payoff activities. So let's talk about that. Now, Leah mentioned to you that in the chat, there is a handout that you should have. It looks like this. It's a PDF. And I'd love for you to meet me on page 5 of that book, which says leverage at the top. Leverage at the top. So we're going to talk about time leverage and the concept of HPA versus LPA. So what are HPAs and LPAs? An HPA is a high payoff activity. You might also call it a high reward activity. Let me give you the definition because it might be a little bit different than you think. A high payoff activity in HPA is something that could or should only be done by you. Could or should only be done by you, given your role, your remit, your responsibility within your team or organization. Same would be true of if it's a sales manager, what could or should that sales manager be doing? Salesperson, what could or should that salesperson be doing? An LPA, or a low payoff, low reward activity, is something that maybe needs to get done, just not by you. And what we'd like to end up with is we'd like to be able to distinguish between hopefully quite a short list of high payoff activities, and then necessarily we will end up with a very long list of low payoff activities. Now, why do I say necessarily a long list of low payoff activities? Well, let's do a little bit of interaction here. By a show of hands, who on this call has more time than they know what to do with? I don't see a single hand going up. Okay, so we're on the right track. So therefore, if during the talk this morning, I can show you a way to win back some of your time, to win back some time from this column on the right-hand side where we have all of this busy work, so that I can reinvest that time into things that only I could or should be doing, I'm guessing that would be valuable to you. So let's look at that concept. If I was able to make the distinction between what was high payoff and low payoff, what I need to do once I've made that distinction, and we'll talk about how to do that today. Once I've made that distinction, there's one of four things actually that I want you to do for me. On page 5, it says 3 things, but I've added a 4th. The first thing that I want you to consider doing is I want you to consider insourcing some of those low payoff activities. What does insourcing mean? Insourcing means I want you to take some of those activities and I want you to give it to someone inside your organization who's not you. An example would be I have a client in St. Louis. It's an engineering company. They have about 15 salespeople. And when I ran this workshop for them, one of the things we did was we drew out their sales process on the wall. And then I walked the sales process with them and we evaluated every single activity in the sales process. And we asked the question, is there anything here that we could get somebody else inside the organization to do? And when we got to the latter stages of the sales process, I noticed that they were doing the commissioning of the product on site. So I asked the question, do you as salespeople really need to be commissioning the product on site? Is it possible that we could train the engineers or the project managers to do the commissioning? And at first they resisted me a little bit. And then they said, do you know what? Actually, we probably could. It would take some time, but we could teach them how to do it. I said, wonderful. That means we can shorten the sales process. You've just saved yourself a number of hours. Now let's take those hours and go and invest it back into activities that only you as salespeople could or should be doing. The second thing that I want you to consider is I want you to consider outsourcing it. If COVID taught us anything, it's that if somebody has an internet connection and they speak my language, they can probably do work for me. Outsourcing. Now, for me, the unit economics of outsourcing make complete sense. Let's have a look. If you are earning, let's say you're earning $200,000 a year. I can see some of you look a lot more successful than that, but let's be conservative. Let's say $200,000 a year. If you're making $200,000 a year, then your hourly rate is somewhere between $125 and $150 per hour, depending on how much you work. 261 working days in America, there's about 8 to 10 to 12 hours in a day. So depending on how much you work, your hourly rate is somewhere between $125 and $150. Now, let me ask you this. Are there things that you do every week that you could pay someone less than $150 an hour to do? I see a few heads nodding. How about 125? Are there things that you do regularly that you could pay someone $75 an hour to do? What about 50? Ladies and gentlemen, when I run this exercise with customers, I find that almost every single time, there are things that we do every week that we could pay someone less than a quarter of what we pay ourselves. And if we offshore, sometimes a tenth. And then when we run the numbers, every single time, what we find is I find somebody that I can outsource my low pay activities to. I pay them an hourly rate that's substantially less than what I pay myself, but then I reinvest the time. I won back 2, 5, 10, 15 hours. I reinvest that time in high payoff activities, things that only I can do. And every single time, the upside is so great that whatever we're paying the outsourced resource is a rounding error. I have salespeople in my workshops where I encourage them to take money out of their own pocket, not get the company to pay for it. I say to salespeople, you take $500. You find a virtual assistant, a remote professional that can update your CRM, that can do your research before you make your prospecting calls. That $500 out of your own pocket could make you an extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 a month. Is that a good return on investment? Absolutely. There's a great saying that Jack Daly, my partner, taught me actually around outsourcing. And I'd love for you to write this down. And it is, if you don't have an assistant, you are one. If you don't have an assistant, you are one. The third thing that I want you to consider doing is I want you to consider automating the task. There are so many incredible tools out there these days. There is machine learning, there's AI, there are automations that we can write. You know, you can use Zapier to connect different systems. In my business, we used to have a person that would take all of our inbound inquiries, and that person would spend hours cleaning it up, doing additional research, putting it into our CRM, and then parceling it out to my sales team. Now, we have automations that take care of all of that, and it saved that individual dozens and dozens of hours of their time. There are so many things that we do these days that we can automate and make more efficient. And then when I win back that time, I get to choose. The final of the 4 things that I want you to consider for me is I want you to consider just stop doing it. It's my favorite. Ladies and gentlemen, there are things that we are doing every week, every month, every day, that if we stop doing it, no one would notice or care. I know this because about 4 years ago, we stopped writing proposals in my business. I used to write these beautiful 14-page proposals. My mother's a language teacher, so I was taught from a young age, reading and writing, seduced with stories. I love that beautiful Native American saying, those who tell the stories rule the world. So we would write these beautiful proposals, and we would be sketching pictures about how it was, what it was going to feel like to work with Immerse and how wonderful the world was going to be when you engage us. And then one day, one of my team members came to me and said, hey, Morné, do you know that we can take our proposals and we can put it into this thing called Panda Doc? It's like DocuSign. And we can actually send digital proposals to our clients. So I said, wonderful, let's do that. So we found someone on Upwork. We outsourced the design of all the templates, but we wrote the content for every proposal and we sent it out digitally. And then one day, the same guy, about a month later, that same guy came back to me and said, hey, Morné, do you know that we can track the interaction that people have with our proposals? I said, really? That's great. Let's have a look. Let's download the last 5 or 10. And ladies and gentlemen, that's where the penny dropped for me. Because these 14-page proposals that used to take us 60 to 90 minutes to write, when I looked at the interaction, page 1, executive summary, about a minute. Page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 0 seconds engagement. Page 11, the timeline, about a minute and a half. Page 12, the investment summary, 4 minutes. Page 13, payment terms, about a minute. Page 14, terms and conditions, 0. A document that took us 60 to 90 minutes per document to write, they were having less than 8 minutes of engagement on. So I said to my team, that's it. We're not writing proposals anymore. And they were like, no, boss, you're overreacting. You can't possibly ask people to pay thousands of dollars to work with us and we don't send them a proposal. I said, run the logic for me. You get off the phone with someone after showing them a pitch deck or doing a discovery. They say, send me a proposal. but we know that they're not going to read it. Why would I do that? So we stopped writing proposals. We created storyboards for the pitch, and then we do a list of deliverables, and then the customer can digitally sign the list of deliverables. And you know what happened to my conversion rate? Absolutely nothing. It was 70% before, it's 70% now. And when I used to write proposals in my business, me personally, I saved 22 hours a month. That's almost 3 days of my time, and my conversion rate did not move. What are the things that you're doing every day, every week, that you convince yourself must be done? But if you stop doing it, nobody would notice or care. I asked that question of a client of mine a few months back. In fact, that same engineering client in St. Louis, the CEO asked me to come and speak to their team. And he said, Morné, I'd love for you to run a workshop about these high payoff, low payoff activities, because I have a gut feeling that even though we're doing well, I have a feeling that we're not being as efficient as we can be. So I said, sure, Adam, I'll come, I'll run the workshop for you. Now, to oversimplify how the workshop works, that day I had the 15 salespeople in the room, kind of a U-shaped table. And I said to them, gentlemen, let's run this quite easily. I want you to each tell me 2 things that you do during your sales process. Don't filter, just scream it out. And I went around the table and they gave me 2 things each, 15 salespeople. So we ended up with about 30 things on the page. I looked at the page after I'd written it all down and I thought, that does not look like a comprehensive list, but you know what? For the sake of this exercise, for illustrative purposes, let's assume for the moment that it is. And then I said, okay, now, gentlemen, I want you to tell me how many hours do you spend per month on each of these activities? And we went around the room again, and there was a little bit of debate about it, but the consensus was 40 hours, 20 hours, 5 hours, 1 hour, 7 hours, 10 hours, 30 hours, and so it went for all 30 of the activities that they gave. And then I said to them, okay, let's make this democratic. One more time. I want to go around the room one more time, and I want you guys to vote whether these activities are, in fact, a high payoff activity. Now, to be clear, if you say that it's a high payoff activity, then you are telling me that it cannot be insourced, it cannot be outsourced, it cannot be automated, and you can't stop doing it. You are saying to me that it has to be done, and it has to be done by you. Yes, Morné, we're good with that. Let's vote. So we went around the room, we voted. And, there would be 14 out of 15 people would say yes, 1 out of 15, 2 out of 15. And so it went for all of the 30 activities. And then I asked them, okay, now that we've had all of these scores on this page, what would you guys say? What would we use as a cutoff point for something to be truly an HPA? And they said, well, how about 2/3? How about if something was a 10 out of 15 or higher, then it's an HPA. So if 2/3 of the room said it's an HPA, then we'll go with 2/3 majority. I said, okay, that's perfect. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to look at the sheet and I'm going to pick every activity that did not get at least 10 out of 15. So 9 out of 15 or less. And I went around and I circled all of the ones that basically did not get a vote. So we went through all of them. And then I tallied up the number of hours that they spend on low payoff activities. Now, here's the interesting result that we found. This is an engineering company in St. Louis that have 3 worldwide patents on their technology. They were about a $21, $22 million company at the time. This is a good company. We found that the sales team at that company was spending 110 hours per month per salesperson on low payoff activities. Now, let me contextualize that for you. 110 hours is 14 and a half days. There's only 20 to 21 working days in any given month. A good company was spending 14 and a half out of 21 days per month per salesperson on activities that they said they could insource, they could outsource, they could automate, or they could stop doing. After we ran that exercise, I went back to my hotel. I got an email from the CEO of the company. And Adam said to me, Morné, thank you so much for today. I just wanted to share something with you. After you left, I held back the sales team. And I kind of said to them, okay, so gentlemen, do you buy all of this? And I said, well, we only gave him the data. All he did was write it down. So yeah, I mean, I guess. He said, okay, that's fine. How about this? How about, as your CEO, I'm authorizing right now that over the next quarter, you can pick some of these low payoff activities, and I'm authorizing the budget, I'm authorizing the time for you to go and find ways to insource, outsource, automate, or stop doing some of these things. If I authorize that right now, how much more do you all think you can sell over the next 12 months? And apparently, Adam says there was a bit of debate and discussion in the room. And then eventually the consensus was 50%. So Adam emailed me and said, Morné, I just wanted to email you to thank you. I think you might have doubled my business in one day. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to stand here and arrogantly proclaim that one workshop that I ran actually doubled someone's business. And I told that story to an audience about 6 months ago, and I maybe made the mistake of mentioning the name of the company, and somebody in the room was a little bit cheeky, and they called the company. They called the CEO, and they said, hi, Adam, you don't know me. My name is such and such. I was just at a talk by this guy, Morné, this funny name South African, and he told the story, and he says that he ran a workshop that doubled your business. Not what I said, but he was paraphrasing. And thankfully, this is what Adam said. Apparently, Adam said to him, look, I get what you're saying. Of course, one exercise didn't double my business. But I will tell you this. That exercise that Morné did on that day, that was the big domino that knocked over the small dominoes. That company went from 22 million to about 45 million in the next 19 months. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go back to my previous statement. Maybe you don't need a better product, a better service, a better price for the economy to be better. Maybe what you need to start with today is to get really, really clear on what are high payoff activities and what are low payoff activities. And when you do that, when you've done that exercise, then I encourage you, I invite you to do one of these 4 things. This exercise, by the way, I run in my business 3 times a year. We run it multiple times a year because when you start doing it, you're going to struggle to give things away. That's human nature. You're going to have limiting beliefs about the things that only you can and should be doing. In fact, let me share an example with you about January 2023. In January of last year, we ran this exercise the way that we always do. And by the way we do it is, I tried years ago to get my team to document what they do and write down all their activities. Nobody did it. So the way that we do it now, the way that we find is effective is one of the clever people in my team write a little automation, and then in Microsoft Teams on the 55th minute of every hour, 9:55, 10:55, 11:55, a message will pop up to the whole team. And it says, hey, everybody, if you're not in a meeting, take 5 minutes right now to finish the hour and just capture some of the stuff that you've done in the last hour. Now, do people do it every single time? No. But on aggregate, if you keep prompting them for a month, you end up with a whole long list of things that you've done that month. So that's what we do. Then we take all of the activities for that month and everything goes into the right-hand column. This column, the HPA column, is empty. So you have a big long list all in the LPA column, and then we buddy up 2 at a time in the company. And the purpose of the buddying is that I have to motivate to my buddy why something should move from this column to this column. And they should fight me on it. They should make it difficult for me to move things across so that I'm a little bit stronger on myself about what I'm giving away. So we were running this exercise last January, and I got buddied up with Oliver Tuffney, who's our Chief Solutions Officer. And the number one thing on my list was email inbox, right? CEO of the company, lots of emails. And I said to Ollie, you know what, let's not even argue about this one. Let me just move the email inbox across, because as the CEO, as the owner of the company, I get emails from the bank, from HR, from the lawyers. And clearly this is sensitive and nobody else can manage this. And then thank goodness, Ollie didn't back down and he fought me on it. And he said, hold on a second, Morné, I'm going to challenge you on this. And I said, okay, what's the challenge? He said, well, the team and I have been talking. That should have been my first clue. The team and I have been talking, and we've worked out that it takes you on average about 4 working days to respond to an internal email. So we don't think that anyone can do a worse job than you of running your inbox. And at first I was a bit offended. I was like, how dare you? And then I thought about it and I was like, do you know what? I need to put my ego aside. I think he might be right. So on the 1st of April, 2023, I hired Suzanne, who has been my amazing assistant for the last year. And over the next 60 days, I had to train Suzanne how to manage my inbox. And I'm not going to lie to you, it wasn't fun, not for her and not for me. It required, when I wasn't traveling and on the road, for me to do 2 30-minute sessions every single day where she would dial in and look at my screen. And I would basically create a playbook of how to manage my inbox. So this particular email, that's from a strategic partner. That one's got to go here, or that one's got to come to me. This one's from the bank. You can't look at that. You just need to flag it and leave it. So we created a playbook of how to manage my inbox over a 60-day period. Part of that playbook was she gets 10 messages a day to send to me on Microsoft Teams. And part of those messages can be, hey, Morné, you've got 2 emails in your inbox right now that you need to go and respond to personally because those were for you. And I flagged them for your attention. And my agreement with Suzanne is that it doesn't matter where in the world I travel to. If she sends me those 10 messages on Teams that are numbered 1 through 10, because it also helps her to learn how to prioritize, it doesn't matter where I am, before I'm allowed to go to bed, I answer all 10 messages. That's the price of my freedom. And ladies and gentlemen, I pay it with a smile. Because since June 1st of 2023, I don't open my inbox unless I'm told. How would your week be different if you didn't have to wrestle your email inbox every day and every week? How much time can you even calculate the amount of time that you would save per month if you didn't have to manage your email inbox? What would you use that time for? What are some of the things that you would love to be able to do in your business or do better, or new initiatives that you keep telling yourself, well, as soon as I have a bit of time, I'll do that? What are some of the compromises that you're making at the moment because you don't have enough hours in the day? And maybe the compromises aren't just in your business. Maybe the compromises are on you. Maybe you don't exercise as regularly as you'd like. Maybe you don't play with your children enough, or walk the dog enough, or spend time with your spouse, or go and have that fun experience. Maybe you're compromising on your quality of life because of the lack of time and bandwidth that you have. And today I'm letting you know that I don't think that it needs to be like that. In fact, my contention is I know that it doesn't have to be like that. What we need to do is choose better. We need to get really, really clear on what are the things that only I can and should be doing. And then focus as much of my time on that as I humanly can. And I should insource, outsource, automate, or stop doing everything else. Now, in the handout that we've given you, I have made this a little bit easier by giving you some instructions and some guidelines on how you can do it. So if you go to page 7, there's a page there that says helpful questions. Because when you run this exercise, there are going to be some pitfalls in actually executing it. One of the pitfalls, for instance, I ran this exercise for a company in Detroit when I was there 2 months ago. And when we did a similar exercise to this, instead of 110 hours, we came up with 274 hours. Now, for those of you that are any good at math, you know instantly that there are not 274 working hours in a month. So how is that possible? Does that mean the exercise has failed? Does that mean that what you've just explained, Morné, doesn't work? No, it means that that sales team has got a completely deluded idea of how much time they spend on things. Now, why is that significant? Why is that important? Why is that dangerous? It's dangerous because once you get to know that team, you'll know that the number one complaint is, we don't have time, we don't have time. In fact, that is such a mantra in that business that people are waking up every morning and they're tired, they're exhausted, because their belief is they spend more hours than there are hours in the month on things that they shouldn't be doing. They are weighed down by the amount of time that they think they're spending on things. And is it any wonder then that that particular team was struggling with their efficacy, was struggling with their conversion ratio, was struggling with their new business prospecting? Because they told themselves stories about the amount of time that they have to spend on things that actually just didn't need to be done. The helpful questions on page 7 will help you to figure out how to run this exercise in your business. One of the things that I would encourage you to do when you run this exercise is figure out what is the measurement period. Now, what does that mean? It means your HPAs will change over time. As Petra members and Petra clients, you will have a session with your coach every quarter where you'll pick the rocks for the next quarter. And as you pick new rocks, your HPAs are going to change. So you should run this exercise, I think, in conjunction with those quarterly planning sessions, in conjunction with your annual planning sessions, and then you pick the HPAs that support the rocks that you're trying to achieve. Another question that's on here is, how much time should I be spending on that activity? And this is an important distinction. Because, for instance, sometimes I'll work with sales teams and they'll say, you know what, an HBA for us really should be, we need to do more prospecting. Our top of funnel is not looking great. We don't have enough right fit opportunities. And I said, okay, how much time are you going to spend on prospecting net new business? Well, you know, the thing is, Morné, I only have 3 to 4 hours a week. I said, no. I didn't ask how much time you have. I said, how much time should you be spending on prospecting? No, Morné, that doesn't matter because I just don't have it. I said, okay, let's do it this way. You're fired. You've just taken a brand new job. All of the things that you're doing every day, you don't need to do anymore. You're starting from a blank slate. How much time should you be spending on prospecting? Well, I mean, in order to do it well, I guess it has to be 2 hours every day at least. Okay, so that's what we're going to start from. Now the question is, if I don't have 2 hours a day to do that prospecting, where am I going to save that time from? What specifically am I going to give away? You need to look at this almost like a ledger, debits and credits. If I put things on the one side, then what happens to the ledger on the other side? I need to save time on this side in order to invest time on this side. It can't just be and, because that's how we run out of time. That's how we get into a compromising situation. That's how we start doing things half-baked and poorly because I don't have the bandwidth to execute. Another question on here is, could I train or mentor somebody over time? One of the stories that I find entrepreneurs, especially business owners, tell themselves is, well, it's going to take me more time to train somebody to do it than it will for me to just do it. What a false economy. Yes, it might have taken me 60 days to train Suzanne to create the playbook for my inbox. But ladies and gentlemen, after it was created, I can't calculate the number of hours that I've saved now that I don't manage my inbox anymore. The fact that I can be standing here in a studio in New York City and be doing this with you, and this afternoon do a 3-hour workshop, and next week fly to Quebec to do it for 4 days, and the week after that to Sacramento, is because I have the time to fly all over the country, all over North America to do this. Why? Because I've given away the things that other people can do. This talk that I'm doing with you now is an HPA for me. It's what I could and what I should be doing. It's what I'm best at. But I would not be able to do the frequency or maybe even the quality of the talks that I do if I was still holding on to things that other people can and should be doing, if only I invested the time and the money to train them. Another question on here is an HPA something that I should be good at? Not necessarily. Sometimes you will have responsibility and remit for something that only you could or should be doing, but maybe you're not yet good at it. That doesn't mean that you're disqualified as an HBA. It means that you find help. You find a master or a mentor or a coach. You buddy up with somebody in your organization to get better at it. But you prioritize the things that only you could or should be doing. When I started as a speaker 18 months ago, and my speaking coach is sitting right there, right now, I wasn't good at it. But I knew that it was something that in my business I had to do. I could and should. So I worked at it for the next 18 months to get better. Don't disqualify just because you're not good at it. And then finally, in this document, ladies and gentlemen, I've given you some examples. So on page 8 and page 9, I've given you a table there. And this is not an all-inclusive table. So don't tell me that, oh, but there's things that I do that's not on here. I'm admitting that that's going to be true. But I've given you examples of HBAs for sales management. So if you have a sales manager, if you're hiring a sales manager, if you have or you are the sales leader, here are some examples of the things that I think could be an HBA for you. You know, Jack, my partner, would very famously say, if you really want to make it super simple, and both Jack and I love simplicity because, let's face it, complexity is the enemy of execution. Then a sales manager really only has 2 HBAs, and that is to build the sales team in quantity and quality. But if you want to get more specific, there's examples on page 8 and 9 of things that you could and should be doing if you're in sales management or sales leadership. And the way that this form works is on the left-hand side, there is whether something should be an HBA. So that's what you mark off. And then on the right-hand side, the 3 columns is what is your current level of proficiency? This, by the way, is a great tool. If you're a sales manager or a sales leader and rocks have been chosen for the quarter, and you then go through this list and you look at which of these HBAs would support that rock, then be honest with yourself about how good you are at these activities. And if you're not very good, as I said before, find some support. I've also put in here for you a breakdown of, on page 10, of the time demands for a sales manager. Of course, the HBA LP exercise works in every department within your company, and you should absolutely run it for all departments. But I only know about sales. So on this page 10, I've given you an example, hour by hour for a whole month, what a sales manager should be doing. Because it is, in fact, a full-time job, at least. And then finally, I've given you some examples on page 11 and page 12 of potential HBAs for salespeople. Same thing applies on the left-hand side. Which of these do I think is an HBA for me this quarter in this next measurement period? And then the 3 columns on the right, how good am I at it? And if I'm not very good, then maybe there's training or coaching or mentoring available to me so that I can get better. I give you these examples, ladies and gentlemen, because one of the things that I see that happens that causes us to fail at this exercise is that we're not clear on what it is that we could or should be doing. Nobody's ever given me a benchmark to say, hey, actually, you know what success looks like for this role? Here are the activities that I want you to execute with consistency, with energy, with enthusiasm. Here is the pattern to success in sales management, in sales. And then I get to choose. But remember, when I choose my HBAs, this is a ledger, debits and credits. If I end up picking activities where the right-hand side is so full that I'm spending more than 160 hours a month, well, then something's got to give. Something's got to give. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to encourage you after today to make this exercise part of the exercises that you run, maybe quarterly, maybe a few times a year like I do. A recent upside that I discovered, which I don't know why I didn't see it before, is when I run the HBA, LPA exercise in my business, it's also an amazing tool for recruitment because now I know what are the things that I want that new recruit to actually do. So it's improved our onboarding process. It's improved our job descriptions. It's improved the way that we recruit. I recently had to hire somebody new into a role into my business. And because we already had the playbook, that was helpful. But because I had the data on what's an HPA and an LPA, it was easy for me to say to them, this is what I want you to focus on. These are the things that I want you to be careful of. In fact, this week, I had a new EA start supporting me personally. And for the first time in 26 years, onboarding an EA is easy. Because I simply sat down with her and said, here's the data from the last time I ran this exercise. What I need from you, Kanisha is a name. What I need from you, Kanisha, is I need for you to put me in a position where I spend my time here. And I need you to save me and protect me from everything on this side. That's your job in a sentence. And she smiled and she said, this is the easiest job description everyone's given me. So my invitation to you today is, let's choose better. Let's run this exercise. Let's figure out the distinction. And then you get to choose. What do I insource? What do I outsource? What do I automate? And what do I stop doing? Before we go to Q&A, I have a couple of minutes left. And I just wanted to very quickly touch on one of the big reasons why we don't focus on the things that we should focus on. We don't focus on the things we should focus on in sales because on this call today, there's going to be a few people that are committing one of the 3 sins of sales management, and that's on page 4 in your handout. So it's not my job to shame anyone. It's not my job to judge you, but I am going to hold a mirror up just for a moment, for 5 minutes. And I want you to think about this because if you are committing one of these 3 sins, then it's very possible that you're not able to focus on the high payoff activities that will really make a difference in your business. Sin number 1, if you are the CEO, entrepreneur, president of the company, and you have put yourself into the de facto sales management role, you are the one that's managing the sales team. You are the one that's recruiting salespeople, then I'm here to let you know that this is going to backfire. I know that I'm going to have many people on this call that are going to want to challenge me on this in the Q&A, and I'm very happy for us to have a discussion about it. But as a soundbite, being a CEO of a company, of a scaling company, of a growth-minded company is 100% a full-time job. Being a sales manager is definitely a full-time job. And if you don't believe me, I'll refer you back to the page in your workbook with an hour-by-hour breakdown of what a sales manager should be doing. If you're wearing multiple hats as a CEO, there are only 168 hours in the week. You are cutting corners somewhere. And you might say to yourself, well, I have to. Morné, it's called bootstrapping. I have to, Morné. We've only got 2 salespeople. It would even be absurd for me to have a sales manager. I'm going to challenge you on that because a sales manager is the one that should be building the team in quantity and quality, not you. So I'll leave that little landmine for the Q&A afterwards. The second sin that we commit that robs us of time is when we take our best salesperson and we promote them to sales manager. And in fact, it gets a little bit worse than that. We take our best salesperson, we promote them to sales manager, and we ask them to keep selling. Well, of course, Morné, I have to ask them to keep selling. It was my best salesperson. I can't afford to lose the revenue. Here's the problem from an HPA, LPA perspective. When that salesperson is selling, they don't have the time to build your team in quantity and quality. And when they're performing their job as a sales manager, they don't have time to effectively sell. So what we often see play out is that kind of player coach, on the field player coach, takes all of the best leads for themselves because they have the least amount of time, and that creates real friction in that team. For those of you that are interested, by the way, when you take your best salesperson and promote them to sales manager, real data in North America, based on 34 years worth of data and 2.7 million sales evaluations, this fails 82% of the time. 82% of the time it fails. What does failure mean? It means that the salesperson that got promoted to sales manager leaves that position within 18 months. And typically when they leave, they join your competitor. And what do they do for your competitor? They sell because that's what they know what to do. when we put ourselves into these compromising, conflicting positions, when we try and wear multiple hats, or we put the wrong person in the wrong seat, that's often when we start focusing on low pay activities, on things that we convince ourselves or tell ourselves only I could or should, but in actuality, it's not an HPA. Leah, I'm going to leave it there. We're just about on the hour. I want to leave some time for Q&A. I'm sure there's going to be some people that want to ask questions or challenge me on things, or maybe just want me to deep dive a little bit more. And I'm very happy to have that conversation now.
All right, team, if you just put your question in the chat, we'll unmute you. You guys can have a conversation with Morné. We'll stay on for a few minutes and let you guys do that. But I want to thank you all for being with us today. I did get a couple questions about the recording. Be on the lookout because there will be a recap in your inbox in the next 24 hours that will have the notes, the materials, the recording that you can take back and share with your teams. Again, just keeping that chat open if anyone has any questions for Morné. If you enjoyed this thought leadership workshop, you can find out more information about our next one at petracoach.com/Petra events. All right, we got our first question in here. Darla says, what if the person you pass things to doesn't have more time to take those on? Do you start at the bottom of the hierarchy in the company with entry-level employees and free up their time with options 2, 3, and 4, and then work your way up, passing down tasks, or do you start at the top?
That's actually a great question. I mean, the fact that you're going to insource something to someone doesn't mean that they have the bandwidth to do it, particularly if they've not had the exercise run for them as well. So what we tend to do is we like to run this. I mean, my company's 14 people. It's probably a lot smaller in bodies than some of your businesses, but we run this company-wide because for us, it's a cascading effect, right? Even my assistant runs this. Not that I'm going to hire her multiple assistants so that she can daisy chain tasks that I give her, but oftentimes I find that she's doing things trying to be helpful that she can stop doing. She can save some time. When I interviewed her, I said to her, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about what are you reading at the moment? And she said, the 4-hour work week. And I thought, ooh, that seems like a red flag to me because I'm giving you things to do. And now you're telling me that you're only trying to work 4 hours a week. But in actuality, it's a good thing because it means she's trying to find ways to be efficient. So the short answer to your question is you should do this exercise across the entire business so that you can create time leverage for everyone. And that includes the people that you want to be cascading tasks to. If they're caught up in the busy work, if they're caught up in things that they might not be doing or should not be doing or can't be doing, or that they can stop or automate, they're not going to have the bandwidth. You could also consider, well, maybe if internally, the person that I'm trying to delegate to doesn't have the bandwidth and actually they're already pretty efficient, well, why don't you consider hiring someone else or maybe outsourcing part of your job or their job to a remote professional? There are so many remote professional options these days, and it's not just for calendar management and email and that kind of thing. As you guys know, a lot of the companies that are doing remote professionals now can do much more complex and sophisticated tasks. So there is always, in my experience, a way for you to flex resources, but you should run it across the entire company to make sure that that time leverage applies to all.
All right. And then we have another question that says there's still an overhead required with LPAs, right? You have to oversee workers and automation and verify that things are being done right. How do you make sure that giving other people's work a green check doesn't become your new LPA?
I just said that last piece again, Leah. Did I make sure that I heard you correctly?
How do you make sure that giving other people's work a green check mark doesn't become your new LPA?
What I'm hearing in that question is that there might be a limited belief kind of embedded in there a little bit. And that is, if I'm taking tasks that I do, LPAs that are not giving me a high reward, and I'm delegating it to either in-house or to an outsource. And then an HPA for me is to simply do the verification, the quality control, the management, if you will, of whether those tasks get done. Unless I'm misunderstanding the question, I feel like that's a great deal for me. If I'm saving 10, 15, 20 hours of doing, and I replace that because I have good systems and processes and I have good tools, I'm replacing that with 2 hours, 3 hours of management. If I'm 17 hours up in what I've saved, and I then have those hours available to actually execute things that only I could or should be doing, the math on that works for me. Now, if the question is, can you get caught up in the minutia of verifying people's tasks? I imagine you could, but that's probably more a question of management style and the tools that we have available. I mean, one example here that I can maybe give is when I see sales managers or sales leaders do things like accountability sessions or pipeline management, I see immense inefficiencies in how they're doing it. Absolutely. But that's not a failure of the fact that they should or shouldn't be doing it. That is an HPA. If you're in sales management, you absolutely should be overseeing, holding accountable, doing pipeline management, but maybe you need a better system or a better tool. Maybe you need to find a way to hold people accountable or manage that particular task in a way that's more efficient, that's a little bit cleaner, that has a higher efficacy. So if I've understood the question correctly, for me, the math makes sense. I'm happy to give my people 20 hours, 30 hours of stuff that I used to do, and then spend 3 hours of my time verifying and checking up on them and holding them accountable to the things that I've told them to do. That's a good deal for me. And on the other side of the equation, definitely you can waste time managing people. However, then I would suggest you need better tools and better systems to get that management task to have a higher efficacy.
All righty. One more question. It says, loved the stat on the 82% failure for best salespeople to sales manager. Why do CEOs fail as sales managers in the early phases of scaling?
Why do they fail? A number of reasons. First of all, if you are a great CEO, you often fail as a sales manager because you're doing it part-time. Being a good sales manager is a very particular skill set. In fact, when I look at scaling companies, hiring a great sales manager is one of the hardest, most risky, but also most rewarding roles that you'll ever hire into your business. One of the reasons I see CEOs fail, for instance, is in the early stages of a business, sometimes when you have one or two salespeople, the CEO, and let me use myself as an example because I've absolutely committed this sin and I've made this mistake more than once in my career. There has been times in my career where I bootstrapped new companies and I told myself, well, I'm the best salesperson for now. I'm going to hire a couple of salespeople. And then once I've grown my sales team to say 5 people, then I'll bring in a sales manager because in my mind, that's what critical mass looks like. So I did this for a business, the telecoms company that I owned back in 2006 to 2008. And I went out into the marketplace and I hired over time 5 salespeople. Now, give me the benefit of the doubt and let's assume that those 5 salespeople were any good and they could actually sell. So over time, I was hiring these salespeople, but naturally, and I didn't realize that I was doing this, but naturally, because I was time poor, I was bootstrapping the company, I was selling myself, I was structuring new products, I was building relationships, I was doing all of those things that an entrepreneur does in the early stages of a business. I was naturally, or maybe subconsciously, hiring salespeople that were what I called self-starters, right? I need salespeople that can think for themselves, that don't need a lot of management. I need entrepreneurial salespeople. So that's what I ended up getting. And for a while, the company's revenue grew really fast. And I thought, man, I'm doing a great job of this. Then one day, I decided, okay, this is enough. I'm working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Like it's too much. I have my 5 salespeople now. It's time for me to bring in a professional sales manager. So I went out and I actually found a pretty good one. And I said to the sales manager, okay, I need you to professionalize this sales team. Not only do you need to take over the management, but I want you to build a playbook. I want you to do role practice. I want you to do accountability. I want you to get more revenue per head. I want you to do performance management. I want you to do all the things that I haven't had the bandwidth to do because I've been doing sales management fractionally and a million other things as well. Yes, says the sales manager, I can do that. And then very quickly, this happened. My 5 salespeople that were all entrepreneurial and had a very, very light touch from me very quickly rebelled because they didn't want to role practice. They didn't want to have a playbook. They didn't want to be performance coach. They didn't want to have accountability. They didn't want to have a KPI dashboard. They wanted me. They wanted me to talk to them a couple of times a week and take them for beers. And basically, if they got anywhere close to their quotas, they just got left alone. The problem with that is that that's not repeatable. That's not scalable. That's not replicable. So very quickly, I had to make a choice. Do I back the sales manager and say, no, I've got the right sales manager. He's doing the right things. And you know what? If the salespeople don't like it, then I will accept that some of them will leave and we will replace them. Or I had to say, well, I don't think my sales manager has the hearts and minds of the team. And even though he's a good guy, the sales manager is going to have to go because I need the salespeople that are making me money. Now, unfortunately, in 2006, 7, and 8, I didn't know half of what I know today. And I chose the latter option. I got rid of the sales manager and I kept the salespeople. And even though the revenue of that business grew, the golden handcuffs for me never came off. So that's why I see CEOs fail often, because when you're doing it part-time, you're making compromises.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being on here today. And thank you, Morné, for all of the knowledge share. Again, keep an eye on your inboxes for that recap coming in. And we thank you guys for being here today. Everyone
Awesome.
have
Thank you, everybody. And Leah, don't forget to pick somebody for that consultation.
Oh,
Somebody
yeah,
with
absolutely.
their video on is getting a 1-hour consultation with me. So please randomly point to someone and then send me their details, and I'll be happy to make myself available.
Ben Thomas, your team is on here. You got your workbooks printed out. We're ready to
Ben,
go. We will
look forward
send
to
you the
chatting to you guys
information.
soon. It'll be a pleasure for me to chat to you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.